Hey folks, Steve here with a very special video for you today. We're going to be doing a mini review. And in particular, we're going to be looking at a module of Stonewall Jackson's Way 2, the Battles of Bull Run. And very specifically, we're going to be talking about the module known as All Green Alike, which is a module that was added to the Great Campaigns of the American Civil War series with the Stonewall Jackson's Way 2, as opposed to the original from back in the day that just had, well, Stonewall Jackson's Way, period. Um, so, intermixed with this in this mini review will also be discussion of the GCACW system itself and what I think of it, having now played through the system a good little bit here for this video and playing through the All Green Alike module. So, it's probably going to be easiest to start with the system itself. So, GCACW, I think for a while now, has sort of been on my radar as a system that's very good. It's mentioned by people as being one of their favorite systems or their favorite system. So coming in, I was a little cautious because, one, that will I gel with what people have experienced so far? Are they talking it up too much? All these different elements coming in that I was cautious of. But I have found generally that I do like the system quite a lot. The basic system of activating units, moving them, what they can do when moving, the different I guess the way the leaders interact with the system is nice and clean, relatively speaking. It's easy once you get the rules underneath your belt. It is easy to just play through and understand what you can achieve, what you think you may be able to do. And there's a really nice decision space where, probably more than any other game I've probably played up to this point or any other system, the interplay between your available manpower and how they can perform if they take their time getting somewhere versus pushing them very hard to get there. And that sort of, equation of the pros and cons is very interesting. And I think it plays a lot into how this game is played. Of, do you do a forced march? Do you try to do do you move enough that you cause an extended march? And all those things have consequences that you really have to look at. And I think over time I'm going to get better at it. I basically played through All Green Alike, understanding the way that the levers and the pulleys interact. So while this is a mini review and I'm not going to be doing a full in-depth overview of the rules and how they work, I think that's covered in many other places. The fact that if you force march units, meaning you can make them move a bit more than they maybe originally were going to move when you activate them, right? That random movement die roll matters a lot. If you roll a 1 and that's not enough, you can force march, but you're only going to be able to do that if the unit is organized, and then they become disorganized, which really cuts down your manpower, which is going to affect how well they're going to conduct themselves in combat. Coupled with that is pushing them to extended movement, which can also make them disorganized. And if they're already disorganized, which will be pretty frequently after a while, then you're talking about manpower losses. So your total available combat power of a unit suddenly starts to drop over time very dramatically if you push them too hard. So the campaign games, where it's more than just a few turns, you have a lot of bandwidth of time to figure out what you want to do. A lot of that is spent trying to figure out, well, what can I try to achieve while my guys are in good shape right now, versus, well, now they're maybe they've become demoralized, they've been forced to retreat, so they have to try to stay out of combat for a while and recover, and they're exhausted. So once you go to 3 or 4 fatigue, a unit becomes exhausted, which means that they can trigger extended movement, meaning more likely to become disorganized and or lose manpower much easier and they pretty much can't move much at all. So you have this whole situation where once you've become engaged with the enemy and you're fighting combats, wherever that fighting is happening, like not much is going to change there. Units are not going to be able to move a whole lot. They're going to become exhausted. They're going to become fatigued. They're going to become disorganized, and then you're really trying to make something happen there. And I think that that whole interplay is just very interesting. Um, when you're doing a small scenario, you're just kind of playing through it. And what is nice is that the small scenarios give you a good bite size piece of the system that you can just play and enjoy and get something out of it. But they do help you understand, those events in context of the campaign. And that helped me understand, like, okay, well, I'm seeing the different snippets. I'm seeing, early on, maybe in a campaign where we're just, fighting through a skirmish. I kind of see where the pieces are, and then we're playing the battle, and so we're using a lot of the counters, but we're not getting to see the approach to battle, and we can then start to think about what would we do better than history when we get to that point in time and where the units are at. So the small battles, the small scenarios to the campaign games is nice. The rules aren't that bad, but I will say that I did myself no favors by playing some of the scenarios that I played. I very intentionally went for like the big Virginia campaign, which uses a map from another game and another game in the series, and has a bunch of special rules. So you have the basic rules, you have the module specific rules, then you have the module specific advanced game rules, and then the scenario specific rules. So when you're talking about multiple layers of rules, that can feel like a bit much to just understand, especially being new to the system. Now I got over the hump of that, and the base game stuff stuck pretty well, and then I kind of have cemented the all green alike module rules in my head very well. But some of the, like, okay, and now you're using the south map, that's optional, that's more rules. I think that if you're new to the system, take your time with that. I ultimately did fine. And my only criticism of the rules themselves is just the formatting of the rules. Is generally, like, how they're all laid out is fine in terms of like what rule section relates to what other rule section, and you're reading them, and that's all fine. I think what I struggle with is like looking at the rules and just seeing a big block, a big wall of text in some of the way that the rules are formatted. And sometimes a sentence that you really are looking for, the really important sentence that like matters on whether or not you try to make something happen, is buried in that paragraph somewhere in the middle, and you got to skim it to find it. And that's just in the basic rules. I don't know that they could have done it any differently than to make it even more bulletized, which would increase the page count because you're adding character returns and all that. So I don't think the rules are terribly complicated. I do think you need to read through them very carefully. You need to work your way through the paragraphs, all the paragraphs of the rules. There's a number of paragraphs that you have to kind of really diligently read each sentence, understand whether that is a new case that you need to accommodate in the rule, or it's an exception case, or it adds to the purpose of the rule that you're reading. So that's not a harsh criticism, just something that I don't know. Maybe I'm just used to other rule books where logical ideas are more self-contained, and some of the rules just are kind of bunched together, and dissecting those paragraphs is just a little weird. And maybe that's just because the rule system's getting kind of older at this point. It's been around for a while. And it may just be an artifact of when the system was originally created some years back. But generally, the rules are all fine, and layering them all together with enough study and repetition, you will have it. So the system itself, it is quite good. Obviously, the components are all very nice from MMP. The maps really are beautiful. They're absolutely fantastic to look at. And overall, I mean, I'm sticking to just the system here in this description. I do think this is one of the better operational systems. There's a lot where I look at maybe some other other games that are maybe not quite as operational, but you say, gosh, I wish a system did more of this kind of thing, which is really interesting. The frustrating part of the system is if you're rolling low on movement, and that can affect so much in the approach to a battle that um, I do wonder how that will affect things in uh, other modules in the series. Just like how bad can it get if you're rolling ones frequently? On the other hand, you have situations where, like, if you get back-to-back activations and you roll pretty good for a couple of those rolls, like, you're making some really dynamic things happen on the map. And we did that. We did that with um, Heitzelman's division, where we went against the history and we navigated the forest, the woods, in the trails there, the roads there, um, to kind of turn the rebel flank on their right as well as the left, and that kind of has led to my campaign results that I played through and are on the channel here, that you can watch if you haven't already. So I think there's a good decision space there. I think the rules are good at putting things in perspective of, like, here are the constraints of this particular campaign. And so I'm going to start to kind of shift into talking about All Green Alike at this point and say that, again, I did myself no favors by starting with All Green Alike, but I had this intention to start playing the system for realsies, chronologically. And I like doing that with a lot of games. Playing through chronologically is it's fun for me for whatever reason. But because of that, the All Green Alike module does have a lot of particular rules that change the normal bits. Like, the command radius is smaller than normal. You have a lot of restrictions on leader activations where only the first unit that moves can attack. So you can't surround an enemy and attack. You can only approach an enemy and attack if you're going to attack. If you want to surround an enemy and attack it, you have to use one activation, get everybody over there, and then on a second activation, hopefully the enemy hasn't gotten away, that's when you launch an attack. So it goes to, I think I saw somebody online describe it as like two drunk guys fighting in an alleyway or something like that. And it's kind of like that. The armies feel not sluggish, but certainly it's like, oh, well, by reading the base game rules and then applying the All Green Alike module stuff, I can go, oh, I could see where if we were playing the normal rules, or I should say, a module that doesn't have these restrictions, these early war restrictions, we could be doing a lot more. Like, each side could be so much more capable of doing the things that it's seeking to do. But here, there's so much more restrictions, so it's probably making you think differently. And I think when I move on to another module where those abilities are back to normal, I'll have to adapt to, and enjoy the increased capability. So this All Green Alike, which it's in the name, the armies are green. They're not as capable. You have the morale and panic mechanic that may not be in other modules, but is a pretty important highlighted thing in this one, where every time a unit retreats or routes, you're either going to take its manpower value as a morale hit, or if it's a rout, double the manpower as a morale hit. And once you reach a certain threshold, the army panics, which makes them much less capable for the rest of the scenario. So the sort of thought process of we're pushing the enemy, they're getting close to panicking. Whether or not the armies would really realize that or not, who knows? But as the player, you're thinking, oh my gosh, if I can just push a little bit more, I can make them panic. But there's risk in doing that. Maybe I'm gonna, all my guys are starting to get really fatigued, but I have this opportunity. I just need to get like one unit to just retreat, not rout, but even retreat, and the enemy army will panic. I'm gonna try it, and maybe I'm gonna try an attack I normally wouldn't want to do, but I'm gonna take this big risk because it's gonna be a big reward. I think is really interesting. In fact, I might even miss the morale and panic process in other modules, because I do think that was an interesting wiggle to everything. It was very much focused around what can we achieve by panicking the enemy. Can we find a unit that we can hit? Can we hit the same unit again, and keep them off balance such that we can cause that panic, and because once you get past that day, that turn, the morale effects are halved. So you might have driven it up, but it will cook off over time. So it incentivizes big pushes in a single day, in a single turn, to really set the enemy to flight. And if you don't achieve that, then it's going to be, you're going to have to try again the next day, but you're going to be not where you were. And so that kind of tug of war is really interesting, and really just the way that the units are set up, that the manpower is limited at 7 manpower per brigade, that the leaders are only so good. It really feels like both armies are pretty similar. And what I really like is the asymmetry in the module, where generally the rebel units have a +1 tactical modifier that will generally give them a bonus on attacks, and kind of incentivizes them to be more on the attack even while outnumbered, on a manpower to manpower ratio kind of situation. But the Union, by comparison, the United States has more leaders, so they can activate more units in a more efficient way. So there is this nice, like, hey, this is what this army is capable of doing, this is what this other army is capable of doing, and you're trying to find the good matchups or a way to make the right advancement that when the United States gets to go again, they're going to be able to really envelop the flank, and that's something Tyler's division did quite a bit in my campaigns. So the asymmetry of the module is something I quite liked. I realize it's going to be a bit different in other modules, and there'll be something like, oh, the rebel leaders just got this huge bonus because they were just the best general ever. We'll see. I don't know. This is it's just one of those things. I'm like looking at another game in the series and seeing Jackson's tactical rating is like a 4 or something like that, and that's pretty wild. And I'm going to have to figure that out, because I think Beauregard and Johnston had tactical ratings of 2 in this module, which was pretty strong, all things considered. And the Union really had to leverage their leaders and transferring their leaders carefully to oppose Johnston and Beauregard when they were present in a combat. So that was kind of interesting. I think there's something to, in this, both the Bull Run campaign and the Virginia campaign, both permutations of it, where the Union, if the Union does not try to push, if you are too lackadaisical as the Union, it's no wonder like you're going to get the historical result. I think the reason why in my campaigns the Union won has a large part to do with really pushing, like being bold and trying to make something happen, which puts it in perspective of like, well, in the historical Bull Run campaign, gosh, if only these leaders had been a little more daring, a little more willing to take some other risks, and not been too slow in operating, yeah, Bull Run could have gone completely the other way and could have been a Union victory. And so, I played the Union very well. I think I could have played the Rebels a bit better in my playthroughs, and I think maybe that's just more of like my mind is more oriented to the offensive operations than trying to understand the counterattack and when's the best time to counterattack in this system. I'm still learning that, so that was kind of an interesting bit to it. The woods approach on the Rebel right flank, if you look at the map, if you look at the terrain, I could definitely see where like it was dangerous to do some of the things that I did, but I just managed to luck out where I had Tyler's division wrapping around the Rebel left, which was sort of the historical approach, but at the same time having Heintzelman willing to brave the woods and come across Cedar Run at a crossing that was unguarded, that the Rebels really couldn't cover, or couldn't cover well, was the balance needed to keep the Rebels from having a consolidated position. So that was a huge sort of victory for the Union in both campaign playthroughs. Um, I'll say that having played the Virginia campaign, which is the Bull Run campaign with the Here Come the Rebels map up north, um, it was interesting to add that part of the map, and I'm glad that I did it for my first playthrough. I really wanted to see everything in context, and that scenario definitely gives you that. I don't think I needed the south map, but it was nice to have it and nice to have it in context. So the south map maybe didn't add a whole lot, and then that north map added stuff, but it was also a lot of burden to playing, with all the weird special rules that I had to use yarn to kind of mark where forces could go and couldn't go, and that was kind of weird. But that scenario was kind of putting together some Lego pieces, not too different from some of the super modules or super scenarios that you can play, that are on the MMP website, like the long roads to Gettysburg or the long roads to Antietam or the long roads to Richmond. These super modules that you're adding, multiple game stuff together. That was, I think the Virginia campaign was very similar to that idea, and it just added a lot more stuff to worry about. I think if you're new to the system, if you're new to the module, my personal recommendation would maybe to just play the Bull Run campaign, Scenario 6, which is just the North map, does not include the Here Come the Rebels stuff, and is really just the areas around Manassas Junction and sort of up to the northwest where Johnston starts to come in. Because I think that's going to get you, the Bull Run experience. It's going to be closer to history no matter what you do. And it is more tightly focused on what's going on. You don't have as many rule barriers to jump over to get to playing and enjoying what the scenario has to offer. So I would recommend maybe starting with that. If you're like me and like you really needed the Shenandoah bits, you really wanted to see everything, just know that Scenario 7, the Virginia campaign, comes with a lot more overhead. Maybe not worth this. The juice might not be worth the squeeze on that one. But still interesting nonetheless. It was a neat experience that first time around. Not sure I'll do that again. I'll probably just play Scenario 6 again in the future, when the time comes. So, I guess this being a mini review, it's going to be a long mini review. I guess I should come to some conclusion, right? I think GCACW is a really good system. I really like a lot of what it does. There are some aspects of it that make it a bit challenging with the way that the rules are just formatted. Not a big deal. The other, if this is a criticism at all, I don't even know if it really is. There is a lot of fiddliness with the counters. So you'll often have the manpower marker, the actual unit counter, possibly a leader, the fatigue marker, sometimes out of supply marker, sometimes a demoralization marker, and even for one unit, we're now talking like there's a lot of counters that are being stacked. And when you're in a battle situation where now the forces are really pushing and pulling against each other, you have these stacks that you're having to kind of move around a lot, and you're adding the fatigue markers, you're flipping it back, and you're putting a new one on during the recovery phase. That got kind of, I don't know, that got dry after a while, especially when I was like deep late in a campaign and I could kind of see where it was going. Like, oh man, I just have to. Here's another fatigue marker. Here's another fatigue marker. All right, I'm going to switch this around and do this, that. It became a little bit more laborious than I maybe would have wanted to. But I had also been playing for a while, so maybe it was just my own fatigue setting in. People have said what they do sometimes is they'll get a tracking sheet printed out, and then you can put the markers off map on the tracking sheet. I might do that the next time I play the system. Depends on the counter density. I'm a little worried that if I do that, I may miss stuff because I'm looking from like the map to the tracking sheet, and I might misread something or not look in the right place, and I'll forget to do something, and I won't update the fatigue marker. And like, even if you move where the markers are, there's still the fiddliness that you're going to have to deal with, and then you're translating what's on the sheet to what's on the map and looking back and forth there. So I don't know. That's probably the one thing. If there's a negative to the system, it's just that. It's that fiddliness. I think that goes away in Vassal, but I'm playing physically, so I've got to deal with that. But generally, I think the positives outweigh the negatives, and that the game is quite good, I think, at portraying the challenges that the historical forces certainly had in the American Civil War, the capabilities, the challenges, the way that terrain affects the way that you want to approach the enemy, and the network of roads, and breaking out your division to each head down a different road so you can all come together later. All that feels really good. So the system itself, I think, is a very good one. Its fiddliness, I think I can hang tough with it and look past that and really enjoy the system for what it is. So definitely glad that I have multiple games in the series. In fact, I think I have all the games in the series at this point. I'm going to be playing through them over time. Really glad I could get copies of them. I really look forward to playing the Gettysburg campaign and a number of other campaigns. The Overland campaign, I think, will be really fun. That's in Honor Richmond 2. Really great experience generally with the system. I look forward to more. I think All Green Alike is a good module. So it's hard for me to compare because I haven't played very many other modules. But All Green Alike in particular has these, like, their restrictions, and that might not be fun to some people, but I think it puts you in a different headspace than maybe those other modules, because now your army's a little more brittle, it's a little more sluggish, but your opponent is too. So you're trying to feel out the best way to leverage your restricted forces to do the things that you need to do. I think it's a very interesting time period in the war, that those early phases, and while the Union might enjoy a manpower superiority, they start to lose some of that during the enlistments ending, and so you have this sort of, even if you're doing well, all of a sudden your strength is going down, you're becoming more vulnerable, even during the late stages of the campaign. So even if you're in a pretty good winning position, your position starts to soften because of those enlistments ending. And so there is this tension that's going to run through a whole campaign. That's a part of the All Green Alike module that I do like, and it'll be interesting to see how that compares to other modules. But if you've not played All Green Alike yet, I think it's definitely worth your time and worth checking out. I suspect that if you own this box and you've been playing the series for a while, you would maybe jump right to that Stonewall Jackson's Way module, the original game in the series that's a part of this. And if you're new to the series, just because most people will start at the beginning of the scenario book, I think if you're new to the system, you're going to end up playing All Green Alike first. So there's that weirdness there, that if you're a veteran in the series, or you've played before, you own this box, maybe you will have played Stonewall Jackson's Way first. If you're new, All Green Alike first. I think All Green Alike is a fine place to start, and I really look forward to enjoying, I guess, the change of the armies over the modules in the series, to go, okay, well, those were those green armies, now we're a little more experienced, we've got some veterans, okay, now our capabilities are changing. And then we get into some of those scenarios and modules where there are the naval rules and stuff, however minor. All that kind of stuff is cool, just tracking with the history of the whole war. I think it's a great place to start. Now, for me, the next game in the series that I would look to play is not actually Stonewall Jackson's Way, which would be in this box. It would actually be, chronologically speaking, Stonewall in the Valley, which I do own here. Now, this is the original. I want to see if we got a date on this. It's some years old. Certainly you can tell. And I managed to snag this a little while back. This is going to be 1862 in the Valley, where it's going to have its own set of concerns and stuff to worry about. But the next time I do GCACW, we'll be playing that. That map configuration is going to be real interesting. A lot of space to cover, and a lot of different mechanics to include. And then a lot more war after that when we get to it. It may be a little while before I get to Stonewall in the Valley. I've got a couple other games lined up that I'd like to play. But generally speaking, I've enjoyed my time with All Green Alike, with GCACW, and I'm going to very likely be playing more in the future and continue to play chronologically through the war with at least the games that have been released so far. The next game in the series, I believe, is supposed to be a Vicksburg campaign game. We'll look out for that. I'll eagerly watch MMP's website for pre-orders in that vein. So yeah, if you haven't been able to tell by the end of all this, I like the series. I'm going to keep playing it. I'm really glad that I have the copies of the games that I have. I really enjoyed All Green Alike. I think that was a very interesting experience, and I'm going to be playing more. The one question remains is, can you get this game today? It's going to be expensive. So until they do another printing, which this printing is only a couple of years old, it may be hard to find. You're going to be looking on the secondary market, and it's going to be probably a couple $100, if not more. So if you don't already have it and you're wanting to play it, keep an eye out for it on the secondary market or play on Vassal. I prefer to only play games on Vassal that I already own. That's sort of the honor system, so keep that in mind too. Anyway, long video. Hopefully this was a good discussion, gives you both my thoughts on the module and my gameplay experience. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. If you really love the series and you have some thoughts you want to share or commentary, include that too. Definitely looking for advice as well as how to play better. I could definitely tell I didn't play the Rebels as well as I maybe could have. Still figuring out what's the right finesse with everything. Anyway, thanks for watching, guys. Take care. Keep on gaming. I'll see you in the next one.